My name is Kat, and this is my testimony. So I grew up in a family that over the years ended up being a broken family. My parents were very young when they started their family. My brother came along really early on, and then I came along when my mom was 20 and my dad was 20, almost 22, 21, almost 22. My family was very polar opposite, really. My dad is the type of guy that still will say, I only go to church for funerals or for weddings, and that's it. It's still a goal of mine to bring him to church one day. We'll see. And my mom was active as much as she could be, but still very young. And by the time I was 4, they had divorced, and it wasn't pretty from what little bit I remember. I think I'm pretty grateful for having that blacked out and not remembering too much of it. And then my grandma, my mom's mom, was very influential. She was the type of person that it didn't matter what kind of day she was having, she was giving. She was showing God's love. She was giving grace where we didn't deserve it. And so having her in my life really sculpted a lot of things for me. She showed me what it meant to give and to love, and to do so with God at the center of it. And I remember growing up, every summer we would go to, there was a Bible camp over in, it was Eastern Kansas, and we would go there every summer, and it was a summer between my 2nd and 3rd grade year. I think it was my 3rd year going, I don't remember. I'd been going for a few years, and I remember that I felt a calling. I knew that that was the time that I was supposed to give my life to Christ. And so I went up to the altar, and I knelt down, and I was praying, I was pouring it out, and I was one of the few people that wasn't crying to begin with. But as I was praying, I could feel this, I can't describe it any other way than His presence, God's presence coming over me, and just allowing me to enjoy the moment with Him, and to just be close and draw close and begin that relationship. And I'd say that for the rest of my childhood, it was pretty clear. I was sheltered in some ways, which is good. I didn't have to deal with some of those things that the worldly temptations and garbage are out there. And so it wasn't until 1 month before I turned 18, and the following 13 months were an absolute wreck. I don't know what it was, but in that 13 months, I was a mess. I'm grateful that those 13 months came to an end, because those 13 months were nothing but out late, out doing things that I shouldn't be. I mean, unspeakable things that I just can't believe I ever did. And then when they finally came to an end, I do remember a friend of mine from college, she and I were going to church together every week, and one week we were talking afterwards, and she's like, Kat, what was it that you had been doing lately? What is it that you guys have been doing last semester? I didn't see you at all. And I was like, well, I wasn't around. I kind of did my own thing. And she looked at me, and I said, there's just things that I'd rather not speak about, because eventually things come around. And I realized in that moment that if I didn't want to speak about whatever it was that was my past, I don't want to be responsible for those things. And so at that moment, I decided that 180 was just done with it. And I prayed. A few months later, I don't know, 5 or 6 months later, I ended up meeting Chris, my husband, well, at the time, friend, who since I was dedicating my life and turning away from all the things of my past. I didn't want anything to do with him. I even told him up front the first day I met him. I said, I'm not interested in a relationship. I don't want anything to do with that. And he was persistent. We became really good friends right away. And after a while, I realized that this was the guy that was supposed to be my life. I knew immediately that God used that timing to put him into my life. About a year and a half or 2 years after we first started dating, I moved away, and that was a really big trial for our relationship, living in a different state while he was here at home. And then within a few months of me finally graduating, because I moved away for school, when I came back, we got married real quick because we had planned that. We knew that as soon as I was done with school, that was it. That was what we wanted. And so we got married, and about a year and a half after we got married, we decided, okay, I want to have a family. And we prayed. We thought, oh, it won't take long. Now we're ready. We've taken the steps, and it took us 17 months to finally, from the moment we decided we wanted to have a family, to the time we found out we were pregnant. 17 months. That's a long time to wait. And I remember how excited we were, how grateful we were that we finally were getting to have our child. We didn't wait to tell anybody. We told the world immediately, loud and proud. And just a couple months later, about 14 weeks along, we lost him. I was devastated. I had no idea why. That in losing our son, my husband realized that there's nothing more beautiful than to have that relationship with Jesus, because otherwise he wouldn't get to meet John. And the next, even through realizing that my husband now gets to go to heaven, it was hard. It took me a few more months to process things and to not to be angry. Not at God. I was not angry at God. I don't know what I was angry at. I was angry. And it took me a while, but then actually I know what it was. My husband and I, Chris, we were out of town in Arizona, and we were going on a hike, and we had been really good at about making sure we brought our Bible no matter where we traveled. And we're like, we're not going to leave this in our Airbnb. So we took it with us, took both our Bibles, and when we went on a hike, we went off trail, we went up a mountain, and we got, as he'll say, 7 feet away from the top. And I said, I'm done. We're not going any higher, because there was just a sheer drop from where we were at to the top. Anyway, I said, let's eat and let's do our Bible study. And so we did. We did our Bible study right there. And just seeing his glory and his works just literally for miles and miles and miles around us was exactly what I needed. And God knew that. And through that, I can't tell you now where we were studying or what we were reading at that moment. But I do know that that was when I finally felt closure, and I finally felt acceptance with what his will was. And I finally realized that it's okay for me to not have control over the life of my child. It's okay. And while we were on that trip, I realized that anger didn't hold anything anymore. It didn't have any weight. And a few months after that, I think it was 4 months later, about 4 months later, we found out we were pregnant again. So at this point, it had been 5 months between having lost John to finding out we were pregnant. We were on another trip, actually, and this one was in memory of John. This trip was, and while we were there, again, we were having a wonderful time, enjoying just being in his creation and being out. I think we were in Texas somewhere, and we started having some symptoms that I didn't realize right before we lost John were symptoms to having lost him. And we were scared, all of us, or both of us, however many, we got scared. And so we immediately started praying. And I asked Chris, I said, what do we do? He says, this. And so we did. We just prayed and prayed harder and longer until Monday morning when all the doctor's offices opened, and we called and we said, I don't know what to do. We don't have an appointment for 3 weeks. Can we please come in? And they did. They got us in, I think, 2 days after we got back home, and we got to see baby Roman. We didn't know at that time that he was a boy, but that was the start of a new round of trials, knowing that we were carrying again, and that it was out of our control, which is hard, but that has really taught me to allow God to work harder in my life and to completely take over in ways that I didn't understand. And throughout that pregnancy, we found out that Roman had some different concerning issues. We found out at 19 weeks that he didn't have part of his heart developed properly. His aorta was shaped wrong. It was too narrow in comparison to the rest of his aorta there. And through the next 20 weeks, 5 months, we went in for countless sonograms and echoes and all sorts of things just to check on that and monitor it. And that caused all sorts of an anxiety, concern for me. I didn't want to bring him into a world that we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what would happen once he was born. We had what we were told 3 days after he was born, and that's when we would see what would happen with his aorta. So he was born on a Tuesday, and by Friday we still didn't have an answer what was happening. And so over that whole weekend, we could do nothing but wait and pray and wait and pray. And come Monday at some point, we were able to go back in and check things out, and there were no concerns. His aorta was functioning just fine. His heart was beating just fine. There was no foreseeable issues. We were able to start lengthening and distancing out our appointments, and I told our pediatric cardiologist, I said right there, I said, I won't say his name, but I said, doctor, this is a miracle. This is God, because we didn't expect him to even make it through the pregnancy. We've had such a hard time to even get here. But because we were able to pray and because we were able to just hand that over, he's here. Knowing that our challenges are so little that it might feel huge to us, but it's so little in his perspective that he's got that under control, and with no concerns, he's able to handle it. My name is Kat, and this is my testimony.